Here's my question, and I don't ask it rhetorically or ironically or with any kind of smug agenda. This is an honest question that I don't know the answer to. What does a reasonable approach to video game preservation look like in 2021? Now, we are in subjective territory here. You're unlikely to feel exactly like I do, and someone else is unlikely to feel exactly like either of us. So let's concede to that point right off the bat. There's a lot of possible takes here, and no video game company can please everyone. But let's assume they were trying to please a vast majority of gamers. How do they go about that? I've been mulling over this topic since news broke last week that Sony is allegedly working on a PS5 remake of The Last of Us, Naughty Dog's extremely successful 2013 narrative-driven action-adventure game. Now, I've been clear about this before. I'm a big Naughty Dog fan, which is maybe a controversial statement these days, which is interesting and the subject of another discussion. But to my point, The Last of Us had a profound effect on me, like it did with so many people. I thought the story and characters were so original and inspired and gelled so organically with the gameplay, with the level design. The overall experience was supremely engaging, supremely artistic in nature. This classic still serves as a reminder that Naughty Dog is in a league of its own when it comes to the storytelling and the granular details packed into each of its games. Now, The Last of Us originally released on the PS3 in June 2013 as a sort of swan song for the console, which was nearing the end of its shelf life. And then it received a PS4 remaster about a year later in July 2014, and I thought that re-release was very justified, given the game's success and popularity, given the fact that the game had some technical issues because it was pushing that aging PS3 hardware to its limit, and given the fact that the new shiny PS4 was not in any traditional sense backward compatible with PS3 software. It was a smart decision on the part of Sony and Naughty Dog to remaster and re-release this game. And the PS5's backward compatibility with PS4 software means that today, The Last of Us is playable across the last 3 generations of Sony hardware. You can easily purchase this game digitally on the PlayStation Store, or purchase a physical copy for like $20 in just about any GameStop, Best Buy, etc., because it was part of the PlayStation Hits line. And if it already wasn't widely available enough, PS Plus members who own a PS5 receive free access to the PS Plus collection, a digital library of almost 24 last-gen games, including The Last of Us Remastered. So suffice it to say, in today's video game landscape, The Last of Us is easily within any gamer's reach, as readily available as any console-exclusive game from the last decade. So why the PS5 remake? Why does this 8-year-old game already need a second facelift, a second re-release? I would argue, as much of a fan as I am, that it probably doesn't. But some of the folks at Sony do seem resolved to milk their existing IPs across a growing number of mediums, given their newfound interest in producing movies and TV series and mobile apps based on PlayStation games. And I'm sure they love the idea of this PS5 remake releasing in conjunction with The Last of Us's forthcoming HBO television adaptation, which I'm not the least bit interested in, but I'm sure Sony can smell the money here. I have to admit, as of late, I have been worrying that Sony could, over time, veer away from their track record of first-party video game excellence, of delivering new and exciting IPs, as they instead pour more and more resources into nostalgia and non-video game projects. Because for me, it is all about the games, about art, about innovation, about gameplay. I admittedly don't know how I feel about Naughty Dog president Neil Druckmann splitting his time between the studio and co-writing and executive producing an HBO series. It's like, he already did the Joel and Ellie story, and don't get me wrong, it's an excellent story, all to his credit. But I'd rather see him putting his talents into new game development, something fresh, something that's not about Joel and Ellie, as much as I love those characters. And surely the resources that will go into this Last of Us PS5 remake at Sony could just go towards something else, a more neglected IP, a new IP, something, anything other than just more nostalgia. And all of this talk again is for a game that's only 8 years old and can already be played on PS5 with 4K and HDR support. And to make matters matters worse, I suspect the remake will be sold at full price, which means $70. Because it's all about the money, I guess. But for what it's worth, there's a lot of aging IPs that deserve some love, and as far as I'm concerned, if any exclusive PlayStation title from the last decade deserves an update or re-release on PS5, it's Bloodborne, period. You know, Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto V, which also initially released in 2013, is following a similar trajectory as The Last of Us because it too received a 2014 remaster, and now a remake of sorts is in the works as well, which will also likely retail for a higher price than it should. I can't help but think back to the days when there were only 1 to 4 years between new GTA games, and even if some of those sequels reused assets from previous games, oh well. At least they were new experiences with new characters and weapons and cars and locations and gameplay mechanics. The moment Rockstar realized they had a total cash cow on their hands with GTA 5 and its online counterpart GTA Online, their reputation for prolific development began to fade. You can even see this pattern, maybe attempted emulation, on the part of Bethesda Game Studios. The impact of Skyrim and Fallout 4 are starting to feel like distant memories, replaced instead by the self-perpetuating Fallout 76 and the Elder Scrolls Online, the latter of which is also getting a next-gen re-release. Conversely, take Demon's Souls. This 2009 PS3 exclusive put From Software on the map. It's a totally classic action RPG game. In my mind, one of the most important and influential video games ever created. But back in the day when it came out, FromSoft didn't have the household name recognition they have now. A lot of people, myself included, didn't play Demon's Souls when it first released. My first FromSoft game was 2011's Dark Souls, and I played that game on Xbox 360. I didn't own a PS3. And years later, I wasn't able to play Demon's Souls on new hardware through backwards compatibility. This is a problem a lot of people faced, especially people who got really into the subsequent Soulsborne games and wanted nothing more than to go back and play the game that started it all. So when I found out that Bluepoint Games, the masters of the remaster, were remaking Demon's Souls and that it would be a PS5 launch title, oh my god, I lost my mind. I couldn't believe I lived in a world where a 4K 60 FPS remake of a classic Soulsborne game was a launch title for the new Sony console. What a surprise, what a treat. What a great way to preserve this now 12-year-old game and make it so much more widely available for years to come. In my opinion, this is one of the best and most justified examples of a remaster or remake in recent memory. On the other hand, take the Rayman franchise. Rayman represents the other, even bleaker side of game preservation. Whereas some games may receive more justified re-releases and other games may receive less justified re-releases, some games get nothing at all because their owners, their license holders, don't care about them anymore. That's sadly the camp that Rayman appears to be in. Take 2011's Rayman Origins. This fun and fast platformer truly reinvigorated the Rayman series and represents some of the best ever work from series creator Michel Ancel. But publisher-developer Ubisoft hasn't made this classic available on newer hardware. The game released on the consoles of the day, Xbox 360, PS3, Wii, PlayStation Vita, Nintendo 3DS, and that's it. Despite the fact that this game is no older than other now classic video games like Dark Souls or Skyrim, the latter of which has been quote-unquote preserved ad nauseum, Rayman Origins is not easily playable today outside of PC. You couldn't play the game on a PS4 and you still can't play it on a PS5. And don't get me started on 1999's Rayman 2: The Great Escape. This is a very memorable 3D platformer that expanded the franchise's lore, aesthetics, characters, and gameplay, and is still widely adored by fans, but there's no easy way to access any version of this game today. It's never been officially remade, and its various ports aren't legally accessible on new hardware. If I want to play this game, I have to break out my Nintendo 3DS and play a stripped-down version of its Dreamcast port that released in 2011. Just saying that out loud sounds ridiculous. You know, video games are a young medium, and they're not preserved like literature and films and visual art, and even those mediums often lack adequate methods of preservation. But with games, they come and go. Physical copies, particularly of aging titles, are in finite supply. If you want to give yourself an aneurysm, start hunting for N64 and GameCube games on eBay. And the ubiquity of streaming and digital releases don't really ease my concerns either. Games vanish, are removed from digital stores, or the digital stores close entirely. I'm pretty paranoid about owning good condition, easy to play physical copies of all of my favorite games from over the years, because there's no telling when a game might just disappear from every place but the depths of eBay, where it'll be peddled to suckers like myself at an insulting markup until the end of time. And I know you might say, hey, some of these games have been re-released on mobile devices in recent years. To that I say, games disappear from those storefronts too. And ultimately, I'm just never going to be able to get excited about playing a video game, even a classic video game, on my smartphone. When I think about Rayman and the many other games and series that have not been adequately preserved over the years, I don't know, maybe if The Last of Us gets re-released another 10 times, is that such a bad thing? Is it something worth protesting, especially considering the alternative? These are tough calls because I can relate to the pros and cons of just about all of these arguments. When we talk about remasters, the lines are beginning to blur with the new generation of consoles, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Take Ghost of Tsushima for example. This game released on PS4 in July 2020, just months before the release of the PS5, and on day one it was already a visually impressive game. But through the PS5's Game Boost technology, as well as through updates issued by developer Sucker Punch, Ghost of Tsushima players essentially received a free remastered version of the game. By November 2020, by the time the PS5 released, Sucker Punch via updates added a New Game Plus mode and the Legends Online multiplayer mode to Ghost of Tsushima, and then the PS5's Game Boost improved loading times and enhanced the game's frame rate to 60 FPS. So think about that. In years past, those would all be selling points for a remaster. Why should you go out and repurchase a game you've already purchased once before? Well, you get New Game Plus, you get an online expansion, you get increased loading times, you get improved frame rates, etc., etc. And Sucker Punch, being the consumer-friendly developer they are, gave it all away for free. Sucker Punch is unintentionally making a lot of other developers look pretty bad and pretty greedy by comparison. Sucker Punch's consumer-friendly behavior here even has me reconsidering the way in which Sony handled the 2014 release of The Last of Us Remastered. Lastly, I suppose there is one other frontier when it comes to game preservation. We call it Nintendo. During the current Switch era, the company has notoriously withheld access to N64, GameCube, and Wii games, has purposely chosen to omit those games from its subpar Nintendo Switch Online subscription service. And why, you might ask? Why not just allow consumers to pay a fee to play their favorite old games? Well, take a look at the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, which was only sold between September 2020 and March 2021, clearly in order to fuel sales through insecurity. You have to buy these Hall of Fame level platforming games right here, right now for this exact price, Nintendo said, or you may never see them again. What a joke. Or what about the so-called HD remaster of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, which is slated to release this July? Nintendo's about to charge full price for a 10-year-old Wii game that, despite its name, might not even be able to run in native full HD or 1080p. And millions of Nintendo customers, quite possibly myself included, will undoubtedly purchase it because there is no other way to legally play this aging Zelda game on the current Nintendo hardware. It's ironic because these very business practices fuel modding and piracy, which Nintendo is so openly opposed to. I go back to my original question: what's the smartest or most reasonable approach to preserving games today? I am still not sure about the answer, but I do know that whatever Nintendo's up to is not it. Xbox's Game Pass is certainly a more customer-friendly solution versus Nintendo's NSO service, but are subscription-based game access and video game preservation one and the same? I'm not so sure. I'm definitely old school. I'm partial to physical copies of games and undisputed, unending ownership. But I do think Xbox, in this sense, has a strong position right now. I do think Game Pass could grow and become even more than it is today. I think it could supersede the Xbox brand and the Xbox consoles themselves. I think it could represent Microsoft's future in the gaming space. I just hope moving forward, Game Pass is a force of good, not of anti-consumer nonsense. I hope it can ultimately help to preserve games in a more permanent way than is currently possible with digital releases and streaming. And I do think Xbox head Phil Spencer is a smart guy, very in tune with the industry. And if anyone might make further headway in this sensitive area, game preservation that is, it just might be him. As I've said before, the Master Chief Collection alone was what motivated me to purchase an Xbox One back in 2015. I know that collection has had its issues over the years, but gosh, when we talk about respect and preservation, I feel this living collection has exceeded the efforts of many other publishers and developers. Look, I could go on, but I don't want to talk in circles. I'd much rather hear what you think. In your opinion, how do we best preserve games today? Does every game that sells X amount of copies deserve a re-release of some kind within a certain time frame, or should this be handled on a case-by-case basis? Do you get annoyed with re-releases? Do you love re-releases and want more of them? Is there a particular game or franchise you're worried about when it comes to this subject? What do you think of Nintendo's business strategy in this department? Microsoft's, Sony's? I didn't talk much about PC, but what about its role in this equation, and what about other platforms like Steam? Do you think patches and updates will replace traditional remasters entirely? Share your thoughts down in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.